So homeostasis is defined as the body's ability to maintain a relatively stable internal environment despite continuously changing internal and external conditions, right? So we need to kind of have a sweet spot for certain variables in our body, right? Where we don't go outside that range, but within that range we're okay. All right, so homeostasis is kind of like balance, right? Maintaining relatively constant internal state. So something like my body temperature, my blood sugar, my blood glucose needs to be within a range, okay? Outside that range could be problematic to me. It could create disease or death in me, right? So I have to maintain myself in this range, but I'm never completely fixed, static, and still at one particular spot. So when I say a dynamic state of equilibrium, that means dynamic means kind of changing, kind of moving, but equilibrium means balance, right? So it's like a continuously changing state of balance, right? Kind of weird way of saying, but the way that I think about it is like my daughter in her preschool, or years ago when she was in preschool, had this giant log, and then they had a board that they would put on the log, and they would just sit and play and like teeter back and forth similar to this on it. Cool, that's fun, right? That makes me think of homeostasis, right? The goal was to be balanced and upright and not falling over, but you never really were completely stiff and static, right? You kind of slightly tweak here and slightly tweak here and slightly tweak, right? Like a continuously changing but maintaining your balance, yeah? That's homeostasis, okay? And the body has to maintain in this range, right? There's, in your notes, you'll see the whole homeostatic control mechanism that lists off the different parts that control our balance, right? So there's the variable, that's the easy part. The variable is the thing, whether that be your temperature, your blood sugar, your oxygen levels, so forth, right? That's the variable that you're monitoring, okay? You also have a receptor. That's the sensor that's detecting what your current blood pressure is, what your current temperature is, okay? That's bringing in the information to the control center. Okay, the control center is the one that's monitoring. It knows what the sweet spot is. It knows that it wants your body temperature at 98.6. Okay, it knows it wants your oxygen within this range, and so, or your pH at this number. Okay, so that's the control center, and it's taking in the data from the sensory receptors, and then sometimes it's making a command to the effector. Effectors are almost always a gland or a muscle that will do something, effect, okay, to change the variable. Okay, the example in all the textbooks is very similar to kind of how a thermostat works in a house, right? The variable is your room temperature, okay? The control center is your thermostat, okay, and also your receptor. And you say, I want my house at 68 degrees. I'm kind of cheap. I hang down in the 60s, not up in the 70s, okay? 68 degrees. So the control center is feeling that, and if the house falls below 68, it sends a message to the effector, okay, the furnace, okay, to turn on. And when it turns on, so if I went down to 66, okay, I'm dropping down, the control center says turn on, then I will go back up to 68 degrees, right? And hang there. I mean, we can do the air conditioning version up here if you'd like, but it's cold right now, so this is a good way to think about it. Yeah? That adjustment right there is called negative feedback. So negative feedback is the way, the most common way that the body uses to maintain homeostasis. To help us stay in this range, we use the process called negative feedback. Negative feedback, sometimes when you first hear about it, you think it's a bad thing because the word negative. That's not it. Negative feedback means that it opposes the original stimulus. So on the balance beam again, like if I'm tipping this way, okay, to do a negative feedback, I oppose the tipping this way by pushing myself back up this way. okay? Or when we're talking about body temperature, if my body temperature is dropping, I'm gonna oppose that by elevating the body temperature. With body temperature, that means I'm going to the glands or muscles and they're gonna do something, okay? That's gonna help oppose that drop in body. If it's cold, what's gonna happen? My vessels in my skin are all gonna close down, right? My skeletal muscles are gonna start to shake and shiver, and I'm gonna generate heat that way. Yeah? Or if I get too hot, my sweat glands, okay, will start sweating, and hopefully I can lower my temperature that way. Are we cool with that? Gelling all right? The other feedback in this topic is positive feedback. Now, is positive feedback a good thing? It's positive, no?
Why not?
Why not?
Yeah.
You're gonna take the bait, huh? It can be, but it also can be a really bad situation for the patient, okay, or the organism. Positive feedback loops are actually kind of like the whole focus of trauma medicine. Like how to keep somebody alive is to keep them out of this place, because this place is like a runaway train. Okay, a positive feedback loop enhances the original stimulus. Okay, so it's kind of like if you're tipping over this way, positive feedback is like, whoop, keep pushing you until you fall all the way over. So some event, some change, something has to happen to stop positive feedback. A positive feedback loop is like a cascade or a runaway train or a snowball event, whatever way you want to think about it. So it keeps feeding into itself and causing even more.
So you see a symptom worsen?
Absolutely, exactly. So shock is a great example of a positive feedback loop that's gone. And sometimes there ain't nothing nobody can do about it. Okay? But positive feedback is, I'll give you some, I know there's midwifery people in here, okay? So childbirth is an example. The act of birthing the child, okay, from a physiologic perspective, is a positive feedback loop, okay? So at the mouth of the uterus, you have a opening there called the cervix. It's smooth muscle. It has receptors for oxytocin, a hormone, okay, that's released. And when oxytocin is released, it causes smooth muscle contraction, okay? All through the pregnancy, the receptor level is really low. And then around like 36 weeks or so, you get an influx of oxytocin receptors on the cervix there. Okay, so now any oxytocin that's around is able to activate that muscle. Okay, what's also happening at 36 weeks is that damn baby's like 9.5 pounds and you're 45 pounds big, and right? And so you're getting huge and heavy, and so that baby is dropping down and actually pressing on the cervix. Okay, the head is pushing on the cervix. As that head pushes on the smooth muscle of the cervix, it sends a message to the pituitary gland in the brain that says, oh, I think it's time. Let's start making some oxytocin. So mama releases some oxytocin. That goes to the cervix and causes smooth muscle contraction. So the whole uterus pushes down on the baby. Cool, right? Well, the baby's head's on the cervix, so if the uterus pushes down on the baby's gonna push even harder on the cervix. And the pituitary is going to be like, oh, okay, you want some more oxytocin, let's get some more. And then it squeezes down and the baby pushes, and it squeezes down and the baby pushes, and now I'm in a positive feedback loop, right? There's an event that's going to stop it. That would be parturition, or the baby out of there. The baby has to come out. Can't stay there. Okay? Cannot stay there. How long this goes on, you know, can be for some women weeks. You know, that process, right? While I'm thinking about it, Pitocin, if you've heard of Pitocin, is synthetic oxytocin. It's used to augment and cause uterine contractions to help cause this positive feedback loop, right? Blood clotting uses positive feedback as well. So an activated platelet will call other platelets and cause them to get activated. And now I got 17 platelets that are activated. They're gonna turn around and call more platelets, and they're gonna get activated. Do you see? Okay, so those are kind of, we'll call those good. Childbirth is good. Blood clotting is generally good unless it's in your coronary arteries.
Would the formation of tumors be considered as positive feedback too?
I don't think so. This is more of a kind of a situational physiology. That's a little different. I do want to give you another example that's not so good, and it's a diabetic crisis. So a type 1 diabetic patient who requires, so type 1 means that they do not produce insulin. The pancreatic cells were destroyed by an autoimmune disease, so you require insulin injections. Cool. Insulin's job is to open the cellular doors so sugar from the blood can come into the cells. So you can lower your blood sugar by taking insulin, okay? Or when it's time to lower your blood sugar, you secrete insulin if you can. Type 1 diabetics require these injections. If a type 1 diabetic is like, I ain't taking my insulin, or whatever, right? Their blood sugar is gonna start to rise, okay? If their blood sugar rises too high, outside the window of homeostasis, the brain starts to detect that and says, oh my God, there's a crisis going on. We got hyperglycemia. That's too much sugar out there. This is an emergency. So what the body does when it's an emergency is it secretes from the adrenal gland epinephrine or adrenaline to meet the demands of an emergency, right? Because if it's an emergency, you need adrenaline, right? Well, what adrenaline does at the cells is release sugar from the cells, right? So that you can meet the demands of the emergency. You want all your stored sugar if you're running away from a mountain lion or something, right? Well, but if your emergency is high blood sugar, do you see what's gonna happen here? So you got a high blood sugar emergency and you're releasing adrenaline, which is only going to elevate your blood sugar higher. And then as your blood sugar goes higher, it's a bigger emergency, so you must need more, right? That's a problem. You die from that if somebody doesn't step in. Yeah? Okay. That's my positive, negative feedback homeostasis conversation.
So positive feedback does not have to do with homeostasis.
Positive feedback does not have to
So
do
just-
with
it's just-
maintaining, absolutely, this is not about homeostasis.
Okay.
This is about an event, we'll call it. Right? Need to form a blood clot, need to get the baby out, need to meet the demands of this emergency, although I'm creating a worse problem.
But the event is not an abnormal, like broken homeostasis.
Not necessarily, yeah, not necessarily. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Maintaining homeostasis is more about how's your body temperature, how's your blood sugar, how's your pH, how's your whatever. However, you can get into situations, which is beyond this class, where when those values get too far out, you can slip into one of these positive feedback shock kind of situations where somebody, emergency medicine, needs to step in and stop that out of control train, or you're dead. Yeah? Okay, so that's chapter 1. That's the big topic in chapter 1. I would be, if I was you, prepared to